going to shift gears in the conference a little bit, and we're going to move from a speaking format to a panel discussion. And this discussion will be on digital transformation in schools, the impact of the digital age on education. I'm going to let the panelists introduce themselves because I think they can do a better job than I can. But leading the discussion will be Dr. David Porter, Senior Advisor of Higher Education at the Commonwealth of Learning in British Columbia. He's been a longtime advocate for the benefits of adapting new technology to deliver educational opportunities, and he's held many senior roles in education. So, David, right over to you.
Thanks so much, Jay. It's a pleasure for me to host this very diverse panel this afternoon, each of them coming from quite a different context and each with different experiences that they're going to tell you a little bit about. I'm going to introduce them in turn and invite them to contribute their perspective on the question of digital transformation in schools and its impact and where we find ourselves here in August 2020. So we're going to approach this in a kind of a 3-segment format, starting with a lightning round, which will be 2 to 3 minutes with each panelist telling you about themselves, introducing themselves, giving you a sense of the context in which they work, as well as the opportunities and challenges they see in the digital education space today. We heard the minister speak this morning talking about the need for more STEM education. We heard a presentation on the value of artificial intelligence and a renewed way of thinking about education. We've heard a bit about an ecosystems view of educational systems, and we've touched very briefly on issues such as equity and access, and I'm sure our panelists will dig in on some of those themselves. So in the squares on your screen, I would like to introduce at first Helen Pereira-Raso, who is head of school at Holy Trinity School. Helen, tell us a little bit about what you're doing right now and what it looks like from an educator who's head of school in August 2020 in the digital context.
Thanks so much, David, and welcome everybody, and thank you for having me as part of this conversation. It has been a journey to just, if I could say as a head of school or in the equivalent in the public system, a director of a board, that would be what our roles would be similar. Like, it's been all about re-entry safely as our priority for our students and our staff. I said, but at the same time, there's been some incredible opportunities over the last 4 months to reimagine what school has always looked like in a different context, given the challenges that the way we've always learned around face-to-face being the predominant, not the only, but the predominant experience for us, to reimagine what that looks like, to create experiences that now break barriers, that allow different access and resource and partners into our school. And the collaboration has been incredible. So we're thinking a lot about how do we connect students globally? How do we connect students locally? Because they can't physically be next to one another. So how do we still create those experiences, those relationships in that way, now that we actually have a physical barrier that's been put in front of us due to the COVID-19. And so there's a lot around that, but we're also prioritizing transitioning as a school into a hybrid learning model. And we've dedicated a lot of time. I'm very blessed to work alongside incredible educators, as many of us here on this panel are, where our teachers have been learning and doing a whole lot of heavy lifting to teach in the new model that perhaps wasn't the original way that they were trained. So those are two of the things, but the challenges always persist that sometimes we don't actually see the opportunities in a virtual world to be just as good, equally as good as a face-to-face experience. And so that's some of the challenges that and misconceptions that are barriers in this work, is that it's never going to be as good as having it face-to-face, and sometimes it can be. So that either or dichotomy becomes really tough to wrestle.
Thanks, Helen. The minister this morning talked about only 15% of Ontario teachers possibly being prepared to teach online. Dr. Janette Hughes is the Canada Research Chair of Technology and Pedagogy and a professor at Ontario Tech University. Janette, what's happening with teacher preparation as we move back into remote and distance delivery of learning?
Well, we're very fortunate in our Faculty of Education at Ontario Tech that we've been preparing our teacher candidates for teaching in the digital age for, well, since we became a faculty of education in 2003. So we're happy that our teacher candidates are well prepared, and we got a lot of incredibly supportive messages from our former teachers, our former students, who have thanked us for preparing them well. This is the area that I teach in, but I also do research in. And one of the things that we've been doing over the past 5 months is working with teachers, giving them tips and general strategies for teaching virtually. Also, providing them with information in sessions on specific tools. For example, when you're teaching math, interactive whiteboards are very useful. We're also working with teachers and their classes. So we invited teachers to bring their classes in to do an online session with us. And we used Google Meet for that. And these focused on co-created lessons that we did with the teacher. Teacher was involved in the planning. And many of these focused on coding and math. And you heard the minister talk about the new math curriculum. So this was a great way for us to pilot ways to support teachers in their preparation when the new math curriculum rolls out. And that new curriculum integrates coding into the algebra strand for K-8. So all teachers are going to have to be teaching coding. So it's an exciting time to be in a faculty of education, and you know, we're very happy to be able to support in that role.
Thanks, Janette. Rahim, Essabhai, you work at John Polanyi Collegiate Institute. You're a secondary school teacher. What does it look like from your perspective these days, and how are you dealing with the digital world and digital transformation to support our students in a completely different environment?
Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for that introduction, David. You know, working for one of the largest school boards in all of North America does play an interesting chords. It hits a lot of chords while trying to interact with families, students, but also just the diverse multiple perspectives that we have as to what education can do for others, and also how technology plays its role as well. For me personally, I'm a cooperative in education and business leadership instructor, where a lot of my work just totally breeds experiential learning to its fullest, but also how do we improve and build upon the empathy that we already have to build compassionate and courageous youth, because they're the ones that we need to deal with the bigger problems that we're even creating for them today. And as a result of that, I've been blessed to work on some really key partnerships over the last 15 years as an educator, where we have a really strong partnership with the Rahim School of Management and the I Think Initiative, which I know Helen is well familiar with as well, where we bring authentic problem solving into our classrooms all across the country. Also part of a really cool project with the Pact Urban Peace Program, where we have a 1.3 acre urban farm that enables our community, which is located in one of Toronto's highest priority neighborhoods, to not only receive food to help solve the food insecurity that we have in our local community, but also provide real experiential learning opportunities for all individuals from grade 1 all the way up to our seniors in the community as well. In addition to that, I've been working on a really cool project that allows social entrepreneurship to be a part of learning, where I've been blessed to be a part of a really strong community called JPCI City, Change Impacting Toronto's Youth, that we've been able to raise over $140,000 to do local and global projects, building schools all over the world, and also do some great work where our youth ultimately become the leaders that we saw them as before they did themselves. And I think that's the real key part here that I want to totally talk about when it comes to the issues I see right now, which are our students are continuously being the passengers and the onlookers of everything that we give them. And that has to change. They are always going to be the recipients of these technologies, the recipients of this data, when they should be on the decision-making table from the beginning, because they see things that we don't anyways. And they're the ones that are going to be solving the problems that we have created for them. We can't solve them. We're only the creators of them. The second biggest thing that I see that we have an issue with is we are not providing enough relevant experiences for our youth that are connected with industry, but also allow them to work on the intangibles that we need our leaders to have. Those intangibles are the ones that are going to get us out of a number of different situations, but also collaboratively create our communities, both locally and globally, to be collective as one, which we haven't been able to do just as yet. And the last issue that I do see, which our digital transformation era can assist with, is our shift of assessment and evaluation. We have been so, ever since I've been in school, and probably ever since you've been in school as well. Don't worry, it's not that long ago. I'm not going to play you like that, David. Don't worry about that. We're so fixated on the technicals and the product, when the real richness, which we've seen in all of our guest speakers today, is about the process. How do we highlight the intangibles that our kids are getting, that our kids have always had, and how do we pull them out so they can see what the brilliance and beauty that they already have had in them, but through measuring the process and not the product or the answer that we can get at the back of the book. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks so much, Rahim. Provocative insights will probably stimulate some thinking among other panelists. So Ryan Persaud is the Director of IT and Innovation at the International School of Curitiba in Brazil. And welcome, Ryan. And please tell us about what you are doing and how it's working in Brazil.
Thank you so much. First of all, David and Chami and everyone else from Convergence, thanks for having me today. Rahim, I love that you mentioned the word process, because I think that's always on my mind, just as an aside. Hopefully we'll get to talk about that this afternoon. I just wanted to give a little background on myself, because people are probably wondering, what's this guy doing here who's from Brazil? I'm actually Canadian, and this is my third year going into the role of Director of IT and Innovation here at International School of Curitiba. We are an ECC to grade 12 private international school. About 720 students right about now is where we sit. Before I was here, I spent 4 years at the Korea International School in Seoul, Korea. And before that, I worked in the Halton District School Board for 10 years alongside Stuart. So we know each other, blast from the past, great seeing him here. School finished for us on June 2nd. And prior to that, we had spent 10 weeks online. We had basically come off a holiday, and as a leadership team had to be extremely agile. We had seen what was happening in Asia, and we had to make the decision very quickly that we were going to move from face-to-face schooling to online. And we were able to do it quite well. I think overall we would have said our first virtual learning program, our VLP, was successful in terms of client satisfaction and student learning. But some of the issues I'm interested in hearing from the panelists today that I haven't heard anyone talk about yet is, teacher burnout. Where are the teachers in all this? Because we know the teachers are working much harder than in a face-to-face environment. There's a lot of work to be done to produce those asynchronous videos and online materials, and everyone here knows what else I'm talking about. Screen time. As someone who sits in my shoes, I've done many presentations alongside our literacy coach and our design and integration specialist to ECC, to middle school, to high school, to elementary parents around screen time and what that looks like. And, we've had to bend those rules, maybe even break them in certain people's beliefs in terms of screen time. And I think that's something we need to discuss. Where do we draw the line? Continued engagement of students, I think that's a challenge as well as you go virtual, and how do you do that? And then the last one is the isolation of families, as well as how do you continue to engage families and build community even though we have this isolation factor. I think we've done some good things. We host webinars every Thursday night and invite families in. We communicate through all the socials and things like that, but I'm interested to hear what other people here are doing around that issue. We started school August 5th, and I think many people know the numbers here in Brazil aren't that favorable in terms of COVID, so we've had to start online, and we're going to be online till at least into September. Because we're a single school, we can be agile in that we traditionally have an October break, but we've shifted some of those days into September to keep our kids online for only 5 weeks, and then give them a 5-day break off of being on screens. And then we're hoping the numbers are favorable and we're able to move to a hybrid model and start bringing kids in. So what's at the top of our mind as a leadership team now is thinking about what does this phase 1 opening look like. We've got a medical center we're working on at the very front of school. We're working on electronic turnstiles, some thermal imaging to be able to take temperature for students when they come in, and a whole social distance plan. So those are some of the things that are on the top of my mind this afternoon. I'm looking forward to hearing what others have to say about that. Thanks, David.
Thanks so much, Ryan. Stuart Miller is the Director of Education in the Halton School Board, and he's on the front lines of back to school in Ontario and probably juggling multiple balls this afternoon. Stuart, what does it look like from where you sit?
Thank you, David, and thank you to the other panelists. I mean, what I've heard is not dissimilar to what I was going to speak about, so I wish I was a little earlier in the agenda.
Don't we always?
Yeah, but we certainly are at the front lines. It has been, public education has had a challenging year between labor actions earlier on in the year, which prevented some things to happen, and then of course the COVID pandemic. We had to very quickly pivot into massive online learning, and now we're pivoting back into a mixture of online and hybrid distant learning and so on. So it has posed some challenges, but sometimes you are more focused when it's absolutely in front of your face. And so we've had to make some of those changes. We have been imperfect in doing it, and I think all boards and all directors and teachers would probably agree to that. But we've learned a lot, and I think we're going to get there. To add a wee bit to what some of the other panelists have said, I think the greatest challenge with the technology is to not be consumed by the technology itself, the flashing lights, the bells and whistles and so on. Because the way I see it is public education and education in general has been from its onset intended to be the great equalizer, that which raises those up and provides society with great academics and learners and people who build things and so on. But there's no question public education has left many behind. It's left marginalized communities behind. It's left racialized and in this country, some of our indigenous communities behind. We've got to be careful that technology does not just become the second public education where it's intended to address equity. It's intended to address all those things, but the same divisions continue to be perpetuated. It has the power to unite us and to bring people up and allow them, but it's also got the ability to divide and perpetuate the inequities that exist in society. As an example, as a board, I was surprised that when we went to distance learning, we distributed 6,000 devices to families in our communities which had no devices. And then we had conductivity issues all over the place. So, and that's not even including what goes on in kids' houses and students' houses, where there's 4 or 5 kids or 3 kids and parents needed a device for their work and so on. So we cannot lose sight that the whole point of technology is to make life better for us all. For us all is the key to this. And the second thing is similar to what Rahim was saying around the authenticity. I think education, and I know we have a time at the end to speak about it, but education is changing insofar as it's always been compartmentalized: science, math, English, history, and so on. That's not the way it is out there in the real world. We need authenticity. Technology can bring about some of that and help with giving kids experiential opportunities and authentic opportunities that will make them better people, along with all the intangibles Rahim mentioned. We can't lose sight of all those things. These students in our schools now are leaders. I mean, we've 66,000 students in our schools, and some of them will be on a future panel, and they may be talking about how technology either failed them or enhanced or facilitated their success. So I would leave it at that, David. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Stuart. Our next panelist is Kay Marie Dunn, facilitator and coach for change in Indigenous Maori communities in New Zealand. It's early in the morning for Kay Marie. And Kay Marie, you're on mute, but why don't you kick that off and tell us about the cool stuff you're doing with your work in New Zealand.
Kia ora, everyone. Can everybody hear me?
Yep.
Oh, cool. Awesome. Hey, look, yes, it is early in the morning, and greetings from Aotearoa, New Zealand, but it's good to be here with you all. I am an entrepreneur of a emergent tech platform. We utilise decentralised tech to enable individuals to store their genealogy and also create their own family memory archives to hold documents, photos and information on their own personalised servers. I'm also on the board of NZ Tech, a peak body as a community representative, where I'm very active in identifying and promoting opportunities to help grow industry capability and being in a position to support industry to employ and hire Indigenous talent. The current state of play here in Aotearoa, New Zealand is that we have around 2% of Indigenous and Pacifica peoples working in the tech sector. And I'm very mindful of the power imbalance and power sharing of Indigenous leadership across the education sector and how that impacts outcomes for our young people. So one great thing about the NZ education sector is that we are investing in tech capability of teachers, and they run a national professional development program called Hangaro Matahiko. And so that's pretty exciting about building teacher capability and capacity and working with children and young people. And then also we're seeing emerging technology, Indigenous-led technology companies who are really proactive in creating internships and opportunities to hire young people and taking them in school or out of school and employing them as training developers or as young engineers. So overall, we're seeing an emergence of what we call kaupapa Māori or Māori-centric training programs, such as the Engine program in Northland, where young people are exposed to tech such as animation, coding, AI, hardware. We've got other training organisations that are focusing in on using esports to reach Indigenous people. And then we're also seeing a significant move towards e-commerce. So another company that I am working with called Te Whare Huka Huka have the Ka Hau program. We've partnered with Shopify, which is a proud Canadian company. We're supporting families to use technology to help raise their household income. So overall, in regards to the potential of tech and where we're seeing things, we are looking at programs that are enabling young people to follow their own interests. So this isn't about, hey, look, you need to sit in class and you need to listen and you need to do things like this. We're looking at virtual learning where young people can actually start at times that suit them, which is usually after 10 o'clock. It's flexible in that, you know, kids can be exposed to lots of technologies and then they choose the thing that interests them and then they can go deeper in that. So we're seeing a lot of those programs starting to emerge. And what's interesting is that the government are supporting communities to run those kinds of programs. And we're also seeing an emergence of companies using Indigenous language, values and stories to help carve out a new space for our communities to thrive. And as Rahim mentioned, our aim is to ensure that our people are not just spectators or participants in technology, but we are owners, designers and engineers of tech.
Very cool. Thanks, Kay Marie. And it really speaks to, your work really speaks to authenticity, relevance, and allowing learners to pursue their own passions with purpose and making them very personal and tangible for them. I wonder if we can go to that question of authenticity, because this is a time where things are changing and everything is skewed and you can try new stuff. The question is, how do we take programs that are authentic, as Ryan has talked about and Kay Marie has talked about, and do those at scale? How do we get to authenticity at scale? And are there barriers to that happening? How do we train teachers to think in that way from Janette's perspective? And how do we support it on the ground with heads of school like Helen and Stuart and Ryan? How do we support more authenticity, more relevance, more purpose in a time when things are very much open to change? Panelists, jump in. Go ahead, Stuart. You're on mute.
I won't take very long because there's a lot of bright people on this panel, but I think one of the barriers that we have to overcome are some of the structures we have in place around creativity and curriculum and how it rolls out. And this is a governmental role. This is a union collective agreement issue at times, and so on. And I don't want this to sound as if I'm anti-collective agreements or anti-government coming in, but there's got to be, I believe, more flexibility provided to school boards, individual schools, and individual teachers to pursue those creative ideas and bring those authentic things, and we get stuck in the structures. And that's not how society is. And that's not the society these kids are in, these students are in. So how we do that without endangering collective agreements or the role of the Ministry of Education or whoever is a challenge. But I think it's a challenge worth taking on, breaking down these barriers and these prohibitive structures at times that prevent all these things. So I'll pass it on to someone else.
Thanks, Stuart. Ryan, looks like you wanted to comment.
You could tell I couldn't do even over Zoom. I think, you know, that's one of the reasons why I'm not here to promote international teaching, but that's one of the reasons why I like international teaching, is because working for a single school, you can be extremely agile. And I feel Stuart's comment regarding structures, and, you know, anyone listening that can really work towards changing those structures, I implore them to do so. You know, we're very blessed to be agile. We just developed a modern learning department at our school. And that's got coaches and a curriculum director and even a research person who's still in the classroom. And this allows us to push forward this notion of authentic learning. And one of the things we've talked about as a leadership team is, as we've moved from the first virtual learning program into our second VLP version 2.0, you know, we said there's got to be more authentic assessment. There's got to be more of these experiences. Even though we have to be doing this in an online environment, we have to get creative to do so. But we've also said that our teachers have the leeway to do so. They have the leeway to research. They have the leeway to make mistakes. They have the leeway to ask for help. And I completely agree with Stuart. Those structures have to come down. We have to provide bright young teachers, you know, or all teachers in the classroom with that space to make mistakes and take on these opportunities.
Go ahead, Helen. Helen, you're on mute.
If I could just unmute, it would be lovely. I think I want to jump on what both Stuart and Ryan said, and I think that we have to look at our curriculum, and I'm going to speak from an Ontario context. Look at it as not a checklist of learning, something that you have to check off. So as a classroom practitioner, as an educator, you know, when I started my career, I looked at that curriculum document and I thought, oh my God, I've got to cover A, B, C, D, and F, and these are the only ways that I know how to do it, right? And it comes with an exam at the end, or you take whatever was handed down to you and you use that. And I think we have to just, one goes back to what both Stuart and Ryan said, but it goes back to what Rahim said as well about where are students' voice in the decision-making process around how they want to be assessed, how they can best demonstrate what they know, what they can say, what they can do. What if we looked at our curriculum as a pathway that's interconnected? The front of our curriculum in Ontario is loaded with interconnections across all disciplines. And so why not start there as opposed to those overall expectations that everybody hangs their hats on, and really give teachers the autonomy to be professionals. And then support them. They need time to collaborate. They need time to think and imagine. They need time to be able to work together, connect with their communities, connect with their students, connect with professional partners. And those are the things that, you know, everybody around this panel has already shared those are the things that are happening. Why not create more space for that as opposed to the very controlled structures that we have all become very used to? We have an opportunity. The systems that we're about to operate in are very different than somewhat different. If you want to, you can keep them the same, but they're going to happen very differently than we had. So this is an opportunity for us to focus on what's most important right now for our students, for them to be incredible adult, young people and adults who are going to give back to this world in a meaningful way for them and for others.
Thanks. This is a real time where the engineering mindset could dominate us, right? And so I saw Kay Marie's hand, and I know Ryan and Janette are ready. So let's go in that order. Kay Marie, Rahim, and then Janette.
I think here in New Zealand, what we learned, especially over COVID, is the importance of connectivity and access to devices. Device poverty is a reality here in Aotearoa, and I'd assume it'll probably be the same in your country as well. And then connectivity, and then what the role of 4G and 5G is going to mean for many communities, especially those that are worried about what's going to happen as a result. I believe in increasing community investment. I think that we're seeing excellent programs that are being designed and created from communities, from families that want to enable their children to have access to, new roles, new employment. So by giving, beyond, alongside schools, I should say, is how can you also enable communities to help be part of the learning journey of their children, and be part of the learning, so rather than the children being taught all on their own, actually how can the whole family benefit from the learning together? And then that connects with Helen's conversation around breaking down silos. How can we actually put tech experts into schools to work beside teachers? How can we take teachers into the tech workplace so they can understand what it is that they're teaching and sharing? How can we start younger to help build young minds? To become an engineer, it takes a long time. The younger we can get to them, the better. And then also, how can we place Indigenous narrative inside the curriculum in a way that helps our people see themselves in the way that teachers are sharing information? So technology is actually not a new dimension for Indigenous people. We've actually been high users and early adopters of technologies, and therefore those stories need to be shared.
Thanks, Kay Marie. Rahim, sorry.
No problem. Janette, I know you had your hand up a little while ago. Do you want to go first? Okay. There are a number of issues that we are talking about, but a continuous challenge that, we haven't addressed, I think as authentic as possible, is how do we as individuals interpret, comprehend, empathize, and value multiple perspectives? And I think once we start realizing that, we can truly define what authenticity actually is. Because being authentic means so many different things in so many different places to so many different people. And I just wanted to add, that's what Stuart started with his definition. And I wanted to further it by saying these are the individual things that we need to actually address to truly get to that point. I've been very blessed to work on a really key partnership at the Robin School of Management in the I Think initiative, where I was a pilot project with the TDSB, where the work of the former dean, Roger Martin, who's now considered one of the top management thinkers of the world, wanted to bring his problem-solving theory, integrative thinking, into the classrooms. And the idea is that we built a beautiful, lovely journey for our kids that embodied defining leadership, defining themselves. How do we understand the biases and the goggles that we have every single day? How do we learn the tools of problem solving and integrative thinking, like systems design thinking, causal modeling, and truly get to individualistic, authentic reflection? Because if we truly understand and hear ourselves personally, then we can be authentic to everybody else. Because there are far too many layers that are in front of us all that we end up tuning ourselves to the actual layer and the goggles than actually what's inside us. In addition to this process, we then added a practical component. And that practical component is where we actually then use the tools of integrative thinking and then consulted to local organizations like Metrolinx, University of Toronto, Baycrest Health Services, hospitals, not-for-profits, so on and so forth. And the kids will go through this authentic learning experience where then their insights will then be shared with directors and heads of these agencies, which till today are still being used. Relevance and the kids' work, they can see in reality. What was great about the last individual and the last organization that we consulted to is they actually paid us. Okay, don't tell my director whenever that new person gets there. Okay, so they need to be also incentivized as well. And that, when my students realize that they're able to solve a problem that communities and countries and organizations were facing for years, and through 2 months of dedicated, hard work in which they told me what they wanted to be assessed on, got us to these beautiful experiences where directors were crying in my final presentations. When you have families, other community members, heads of education, all in the same presentation, that is how we start digging towards authenticity. Creating those experiences where every piece of the pie is real. Kids today are burdened with far too much fakeness and frivolous work. There's no point. If my kids are coming back to me once they graduate and say, hey, sir, I only used about 5% of my high school, are you kidding me? We consider them educated, but they haven't learned jack. It doesn't make sense to me. And to me, to add to this, is that the way that we can get to these authentic experiences and these authentic ecosystems, which we've heard over and over, is when we throw out the roles. There is no such thing as a student. There is no such thing as a teacher. There's no such thing as an administrator. We are all here in this spot at the same time. We have something to add, we have something to learn, and we have to do it for a particular reason. That's all we are. Once we start understanding that we are all moving towards a particular way of problem solving to better our communities, to better our worlds, then all that is gone. All the dust is gone, and the realness will show itself. And I've been very blessed to be a part of this initiative that now packages these lovely experiences that we've had with 20, 30 organizations over the last decade. And now we create a problem-solving kit. And that kit is now being shared, not only with the students, but also the teachers. The teachers get the tools, the kids get to play in a sandbox so they can mess around with these tools as well. And then we come together at the end of the semester like a science fair, but it's a problem-solving fair where the actual director of that non-for-profit organization, that for-profit organization that gave us the challenge is there to be, hey, I really like that aspect. Oh my God, I'm gonna change what I speak to in my meetings now because of that insight that that 5-year-old kid gave or that 8-year-old kid gave, something that I've never been able to see before. So to me, it starts with understanding that multiple perspectives have weight. There is no reason we need to answer our questions that traditionally work for the 20%. No more. That this time has shown that that can't work anymore. Okay? And through integrative thinking and through this learning the problem-solving theory and this process that we've created, we're now getting into schools all across the nation. And our goal is to, further that as well. And I'm very blessed to be a part of that initiative.
Thanks, Ryan. Sorry, Rahim, pardon me. My fumble. Janette, we have a question actually from the audience, and it really fits perfectly with this line of discussion. And it says, a question for one of the wonderful panelists. Could you please address some of the ways in which new and upcoming teachers can prepare for these new directions and that our education and world is going? I'm referring specifically to teacher candidates that are about to graduate from teacher training colleges. We're already very nervous, and this seems very intimidating. We're hearing from experts who are flipping the paradigm we've learned to work within. What do you think of that, Janette?
That's exactly right. That's exactly what's required is a paradigm shift. And I hope all faculties of education are preparing teacher candidates for that. I know that ours is. And it's a shift that moves the teacher from the keeper of the knowledge to more of a facilitator role. And it means focusing on, rather than content knowledge or anything that could be Googled, to personalized learning, individualized learning, inquiry-based learning. And I would even say that we should be focused on passion-based learning. And I think a lot of my panelists agree. I'm hearing the same kinds of things, that learning should be interest-driven and transdisciplinary. I'm the director of a STEAM lab. So, you know, it's great to bring together STEM, but for me, that A in STEAM, whether that's aesthetics or creativity or the arts, that's really important as well. So I think all of these things need to be attended to. And I wouldn't call it teacher training. I always think about SEALs when I hear the word training. I use teacher preparation or teacher professional development. But as Helen, I think it was Helen who said, you know, I think the key is voice and choice for students. And we have specific curricular goals in all of our courses, but the path to reach those goals or objectives varies for every student individually. So one of the things that we've been very successful at doing is introducing our teacher candidates to maker pedagogies. And this has been an initiative that the Ministry of Ontario Education has been focused on as well. So we did a project that involved 20 different school boards and 60 teachers. And the ministry actually funded them to establish a makerspace. But the focus was on the pedagogies, what happens in those spaces, because you don't need to have a fully equipped makerspace to do making. It was eye-opening for all of those teachers, many of whom weren't necessarily technologically adept, but they saw the difference in terms of motivation and engagement in their students, and they focused on that kind of passion-driven learning, and that's the way we need to see education going.
Down to the final 6 minutes. And so I'm going to give everybody 1 minute, including Ryan, to start it off, who's waving frantically. Take us out with some thoughts from Ryan Persaud from Curitiba, Brazil.
What happened? 6 minutes left. Oh my goodness. Okay. I was going to piggyback on what Janette was saying, and I think I'll probably use that as my closing since this is the last thing I'm going to say. And I'm just going to thank Jema for that question. Sounds like she's a upcoming teacher to the profession. So welcome to the profession. You're coming in, I think, at probably the best time ever to enter the profession. And that's not a word of a lie, because the skill sets and the tenacity, to steal a word from today, and the agility you're going to learn this first year will serve you well your entire teaching career. The point I was going to piggyback from Janette was on top of all her great advice in terms of coming into the profession right now as a new teacher, I would also add, seek out networks and free knowledge. There is so much free knowledge out there you would not believe. You just have to put yourself out there. Get connected on your socials. You know, LinkedIn is get connected with people there. Twitter, I use it all the time. I am connected with so many great people for so many great free resources and ideas. The number of workshops that are coming out from a variety of organizations. Don't just look within, you know, your home province, if you're in Ontario or your home country. Look at other institutions that are offering free webinars, free conferences. Google's got a great one that's going on tonight and into tomorrow, and it's all for free. Sal Khan just spoke there. So there's great stuff happening for free. Just get yourself out there, get connected. Before you leave Teachers College, build yourself a nice professional learning network with your fellow graduates and stay connected.
Thank you, Ryan. Helen, in the spirit of the true lightning round, how would you like to go out with a bang?
I think for me, it all comes down to know your learners, give them the agency to own this journey and to be the authors of the journey, and create space for their voice in everything you do. That, you know, we hold them to the high. Yes, we all have a curriculum. yes, there's expectations that's, you know, that we have to work towards. But as Janette said, and all of us have talked about, the path to that needs to be the learner's path. And so create a space for our learners to be the ones who set every brick in that path and just walk alongside and make sure that you support your learners in this journey, but also support each other. So just building on Ryan, build that network, be a team player, and work alongside the people around you.
Stuart, your thoughts? Stuart, you're on. Yeah, go.
Yeah, I will just be very brief, because there's two aspects of this that we have not touched on, but we have in fact touched on them in everything we have said. And I think by embracing technology, creating the climate around equity of access for kids, whether that's conduct, or students, whether that's conductivity, helping teachers and supporting teachers to be creative, etc., innovative, and to reach out and do this work authentically and with relevance. We are building a resilient, self-confident society of young people. In all our generation, and I'm probably, well, I guess it's between you and I, David, who are the oldest on this panel, but we have not faced collectively a situation where we have had to demonstrate our resilience like we have now. Individually, for sure, we've all had individual circumstances at times. But we want our students, and they want to be resilient, self-confident, contributing members of society. And this can be a vehicle to do that. And I'd leave it with that.
Well said. Kay Marie, you still there? I'm not seeing her in the squares. So Janette, your final thoughts, and then we'll give Rahim the closing statement.
Sure. So I'll be short and sweet too. If we've learned anything from this pandemic, it's that the need for human connection and compassion is profound. And I think we need to focus on social emotional learning, global competencies, and personalized learning. And I would like to banish the term soft skills from our vocabulary, because there are collaboration, communication, creativity, digital citizenship, all of these are anything but soft. In fact, they are essential skills, and they are lifelong skills.
Rahim?
Thank you for sharing, everyone. And, you know, a long time ago, I stopped introducing myself as an educator, and I started introducing myself as an observer of personalities and passions, and a deliverer of opportunities and experiences. That's who I am. And as a result, how do we at this specific time utilize that understanding at different parts of one's learning process? And how do we, as in different offices in different parts of the world, how do we enable the individuals we service to become the best version of themselves? Because that's what we need for this world. And how does technology play its role as we start having to understand one's intent for wherever they want to go? And instead of us being the ones that say, this is good or this is bad, this is all about how do we help you along your way? And why is it that you want to go there? Thank you, everybody.
Thanks so much, Rahim. Thanks to the panel. Virtual high fives should be showing up in the chat room right now. And if anybody'd like to send us a virtual beer, that would be good too. But here we go. Thank you, Helen Pereira-Raso, Dr. Janette Hughes, Rahim Essabhai, Ryan Persaud, Stuart Miller, and Kay Marie Dunn for your wonderful participation and thoughts this afternoon. And back to you, Jay.
Thank you. That was a terrific panel. Thank you guys all. It's you know, I go to a lot of conferences, I'm sure a lot of you do, and to see that level of interactivity and chemistry on a panel is it's unprecedented. So thank you for that.